those, Hare Krishna, those of you who have been already existing members of the batch, some devotees wanted to join in this batch, at least those who are connected to me here around Hinjawadi. However, as a course of that whole thing, if I had to take them to a Bhakti Shastri batch, then I had to again do Ishopanishad, the Nectar devotion book for them. So after a long back and forth of communication, then I decided I'll have a new English batch. So therefore, we'll have some more new guests join in here. So for all of you, those who are joining for the first time, who are part of this batch for the first time, I'm not having a separate orientation session. I have shared that video with all of you on the group. So please do watch that to get an idea, and we'll plan to meet during the week or maybe next week before the class for some time. Second thing, as a part of this is a Bhakti Shastri program. So as a part of this online Bhakti Shastri program, is it audible, loud and clear to all? Okay, good. What about on the live? Have you tested?
Live.
Okay. Audible. What was the second point I was saying was, this being a Bhakti Shastri online program, there are certain requirements, rules and regulations. One is, I'm just kind of reiterating, ideally for the new devotees, but also helpful for those who have been part of Bhakti Shastri batch already, to be able to attempt exam, which is a part of the curriculum. Every student requires minimum 75% of attendance. Hare Krishna. Can we have the Zoom chat later on? Too many messages going on. Hold on for that. So 75% attendance is minimum requirement. So whenever you join in session, please do mark your attendance. However, marking an attendance also has an inherent criteria. Your attendance would only be considered if your camera is on. So if your camera is off, you consider yourself by default absent. We have 3 highly qualified, highly alert group administrators watching you from all over the world. 2 from Bombay. I mean, of course, it's not a capital of India, but it's the commercial capital of India. And another couple from the world's capital, commercial capital, London. So Nitai, Prabhu and Mother Taruni Gopika. So 4 devotees have their eyes on all the time. Hopefully they'll keep their cameras on all through the session. So they'll be keeping an eye on all of you. And in between, they'll be taking a screenshot. And if in case they find out during any random time, they take a screenshot, any one of your camera was off. So Hari Bol, there is no excuse, huh? So there is an absent mark for it. So this is a disclaimer up front. However, if for some genuine reasons, you cannot keep your cameras on for some particular day. So Nitai Pran Prabhu, Taruni Gopika Mataji, you can see them. And also our Harinam Krishna Prabhu and Mother Medhamani, they're also there. You can let know any of these devotees. So they'll make a note of it. All right. So that's the thing. Any other announcements or administrators for the purpose of just to introduce the new students? Attendance criteria, exam criteria, all that I've already said. So I guess fine. So let's begin with it. I'll offer prayers. So we are starting with Bhagavad-Gita. For those of you joining now, or just for this existing batch, we have already covered Ishopanishad, the Nectar devotion, and we'll be covering now Bhagavad-Gita and Nectar of instruction, and take it forward with Ishopanishad and Nectar devotion again. So with that little background, let's offer a prayer, and then we'll start our discussion from one of the most exciting books, Bhagavad-Gita. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Nata Vitam Tam Sajivam Evam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyataya Dishatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gautase Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kant Radha Kant Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advait Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So welcome all of you again to this Bhagavad-Gita program, Bhagavad-Gita class. We also call it as Gita Life. Okay, so I hope screen is visible. So we're going to start with the very first chapter today, titled as Observing the Armies. Considering the time and the subject matter that I intend to discuss today, we might be able to cover maybe 20 odd verses today. We might have 2 sessions for this chapter 1. But to begin with, just a little introduction to what Bhagavad-Gita is all about, and then we'll get into the details of this chapter. What is Bhagavad-Gita? Bhagavad-Gita is a classic conversation that took place between Lord Shri Krishna and Arjuna at the battlefield of Kurukshetra around 5,000 years ago. The beauty of this conversation, the beauty of this text, first, it is in the format of question answer. It is not a monologue. Second, it is the only text where you have the words spoken by the Lord directly. Generally, in all religious texts, you'll find a messenger or a representative speaking the words of God. But Bhagavad-Gita is the only text where you have the words spoken by the God. How is this message of Bhagavad-Gita, which was something spoken 5,000 years ago, could be still relevant today? Do we study Bhagavad-Gita because it is just a religious text, is a subject matter of faith, or is it science? I'm going to speak at length about this point. Is Bhagavad-Gita science, or how should we study Bhagavad-Gita? Because Prabhupada makes this point right at the very first line of his purport. However, before we go there, Bhagavad-Gita is just not a religious text. The word religion itself is a little controversial and contradictory. Bhagavad-Gita speaks more than what religion as we know today. Let's talk briefly about how message of Bhagavad-Gita is relevant or how it can help us. I'm giving you some little bit of tips here just to have some understanding if anyone asks us what Bhagavad-Gita is about. Some simple things that you can, for us to know and for us to tell others. I see Bhagavad-Gita as one of the best self-help book, where Krishna is the original motivational speaker. And the one who required motivation was Arjuna, because he was very, very discouraged. What does a motivational speaker do? He motivates you to rise up and perform your duty, and that's what Lord Shri Krishna does. Bhagavad-Gita fulfills this purpose through two ways. One, it acts as a navigation system. I often give this example, like Google Maps. It helps you reach your destination when you're stuck in a traffic, it reroutes. Similarly, the message of Bhagavad-Gita helps us reach our destination, or the goal of life. And when we are faced with difficulties or crises, it helps us find us a solution, an alternative solution. But one thing which is proprietary to Bhagavad-Gita, which is not there with any of the navigational tools today, is it also defines our destination. Asatama satagamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya mrityumva amritam gamaya. Like that, message of Bhagavad-Gita not only takes us to our destination, but tells us what is the purpose of human life, or what should be our destination. Second thing, it's a life transforming book. His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj makes a statement, I'll just repeat it as it is, whereas His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj says something what Srila Prabhupada also said. In fact, everyone in our disciplic line emphasizes on this. So I'm just quoting His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj right now. He says somebody could be very learned in scriptures. Somebody could be who would have read all the scriptures, might have memorized everything, but everything is waste if there is no transformation of heart. The study of scriptures is supposed to bring transformation. There has to be a change of heart, from hostility to love, from violence to compassion, again from greed and envy, hatred. All these feelings should be transformed into or replaced by compassion, kindness, gratitude, love, whatnot. And that is what the journey of Bhagavad-Gita is all about. Just like the battlefield took place, or the battle took place between Pandavas and Kauravas, you can call it as the P camp and the D camp, the two sides, where the Duryodhana camp were represented by two main personalities, Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, where Dhritarashtra represents the wrong motive and Duryodhana represents the wrong action. Whereas at the side of Pandavas, Krishna indicates the right motive and Arjuna indicates the right action. Even before the battle had to begin, the result was already hard-coded. Who will win the war? The point here is, our acharyas explain, the war that took place 5,000 years ago metaphorically continues to take place even today, where the field or the battlefield of Kurukshetra has been replaced by our heart, our own heart, where there is a constant tug of war between the divine and demoniac, wherein we are always struggling to make the decision, the right decision. And how should we, or what kind of decision should we make? That is what is highlighted through the message of Bhagavad-Gita. And therefore, one of the very important messages of Bhagavad-Gita among everything is about Dharma. What is Dharma? Dharma is of three kinds: Adharma, Dharma, and Parodharma. I'll speak shortly about it in more in details when we come to that subject matter. So going back to the slide deck, this is what it is. It helps us to make our decisions properly. I believe all of you might agree. How many of you had challenges or faced challenges making decisions in your life? Please raise your hands. When you have to make a decision, there has to be some reference point based on what we make a decision. And our reference point is generally based on our experiences, or through that experiences, whatever we have learned. And therefore, we are always confused. Even after we have set our decision, can we close all the doors inside? Yeah, that's a lot of sound coming. What was I saying about? Decision making. Even when we make a decision, still we are very unsure if it is the right decision or not, because we don't have the right reference point based on what we make a decision. Again, Bhagavad-Gita sets the right reference point. That's what how Bhagavad-Gita starts. Going back to the slide briefly, taking a look. Bhagavad-Gita has around 700 shlokas in the question answer format, has 18 chapters, which are divided into 3 sections of Karma Yoga, chapter 1 to chapter 6, then Bhakti Yoga, chapter 7 to chapter 12, and then finally the last 6 chapters, Jnana Yoga. Let's begin with our chapter 1, which has around close to 46 verses, which can be divided into 5 sections, where the first section, first 2 sections are what we're going to study today largely. If time permits, we'll go to the third section also, where there is a conversation between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay. Dhritarashtra asks a question and Sanjay begins to answer and describes about the situation of Duryodhana's army. And then from verse number 13 to 20, Sanjay describes about the situation of Pandavas' army. That's what ominous is. So we'll take a look at it in a short while. Let's begin with our very first verse, with a little introduction here to the subject matter, how this message of Bhagavad-Gita is relevant and what is Bhagavad-Gita. So I hope all of you have a copy of Bhagavad-Gita. You might want to make some notes. It's helpful for revision later on. So let's recite. So in this chapter, particularly for this chapter, maybe up to the second chapter, we might pay more attention to the Sanskrit words, because there is a lot to learn from the usage of words by the particular speaker, whoever is speaking at that point of time. So interestingly, the Bhagavad-Gita. Okay, before we get into even the verse, okay, let's take the slide off for a second. Let me just address a brief kind of a controversy about the subject matter. Sometimes there is a discussion about when does Bhagavad-Gita begins. Now, Bhagavad-Gita in English is called Song of God. Krishna is Bhagwan, Gita means word spoken. So in chapter 1, Krishna has not spoken anything. Krishna begins to speak from chapter 2. So sometimes people say it looks like the message of Bhagavad-Gita begins from chapter 2. So chapter 1, many times I have seen people say chapter 1, there is nothing, it's just a history. We have read and heard so many times from Mahabharata, what happened, how Arjuna got bewildered, and that's it. And let's move on. I'm sorry. At my end, I would like to make a humble disclaimer here. If somebody who has not understood chapter 1, I have not learned what is happening, something very, very important is happening in chapter 1, then the secret or the message hidden from chapter 2 onwards will not get revealed to us. Let me give an example of what I'm trying to say here. Imagine you've gone to watch a movie. If it's a man, he might identify himself with the hero. If it's a lady, she might identify herself with the heroine. And when you get absorbed into that movie, seeing yourself into that role play, generally your attention span, absorption, and experience is far greater. Yes or no? Because you identify. When you identify, you go through the emotions. And that's the reason you will see people laughing, crying, all different kinds of emotion. Chapter 1 helps you get into the shoes of Arjuna. Chapter 1 helps you to understand that Krishna is the driver of your chariot. Krishna is taking care of your life. Unless if that thing is set for us, therefore Prabhupada in the introduction, which we are not discussing here, the introduction, I'm going to give it as a homework for all of you to study. Prabhupada in the introduction very clearly writes, the message of Bhagavad-Gita is only meant for the devotees. Now, what it means to be a devotee? Devotee means one who has given his life in the hands of Lord Shri Krishna, who has agreed that the charioteer of my life is Lord Shri Krishna. Unless that transition happens within our consciousness, we'll not be able to understand. We'll just read the message of Bhagavad-Gita as a third party. It would be like reading some philosophical book for the sake of writing an exam. But it will not make any impact. Particularly, will not be able to pick out any application points for us. That's a very important thing. So where does Bhagavad-Gita begins? Bhagavad-Gita begins with chapter 1. And that is my homework to make it relatable to you, where you find yourself in the shoes of Arjuna. Let's see how we do it today, if you're able to relate to it or not. So with that, let's begin with very first verse. Dhritarashtra vacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveti yussavaha mamaka pandavas chaiva kim akurvata sanjaya. What an auspicious beginning of Bhagavad-Gita. Any chanting of mantras always begin with Om. So if it was Om Krishnaya Namaha Vasudevaya Namaha, that is called as auspicious beginning. Even Om Ganeshaya Namaha would have been very wonderful here. And you have Dhritarashtra Vacha. Now, who is Dhritarashtra? Now, if you see the relationship between Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana is very interesting. Dhritarashtra. Rashtra means the seat, the position, and Dhrit means Fevicol ka jod. When I was a young boy, there used to be one Fevicol in India. There used to be one advertisement of Fevicol company. Fevicol is like, gum. And in that ad, they used to show that, somebody had put a Fevicol on the chair, and some person goes and sits on the chair. And he tries all his might, but he cannot get up from the chair. That is what I call Dhritarashtra. Fevicol ka jod. Baith gaya to baith gaya, chhodna nahi hai. He doesn't want to give up his position. And that is what Dhritarashtra is all about. So Dhritarashtra was a king. So many people tried talking to Dhritarashtra. When the dice game was there, Vidura advised him. Vidura told him, Vidura was his advisor, Dhritarashtra, don't do that. Why are you doing that? Don't you understand the motives of your son? This will lead to a huge fratricidal war. Your son is crazy. He will go to any extent to insult Pandavas. Dhritarashtra said, what can I do, Vidura? Destiny is very powerful. Whatever destiny wants will happen. I am just a puppet in the hands of destiny. And again, if Vidura would argue, would talk to him about destiny, free will, and all that, then ultimately Dhritarashtra would say, oh, Vidura, what can I do? I love my Duryodhana so much. If I do not fulfill his conditions, then he threatens me that he'll go and commit suicide. I cannot live without Duryodhana. And Vidura will remind him, my dear Dhritarashtra, don't forget, you don't have one son, you have 100 sons. Ek chala bhi gaya to 99 bache hai. There is nothing to be lost about. But in all this thing, when you carefully study and see how our acharyas comments, actually the actual culprit for the war of Kurukshetra was Dhritarashtra. Vyasdevji, just a day before Mahabharata talks about it, just a day before the war was about to begin, Vyasdevji went and met Dhritarashtra. Again, he instructed Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was son of Srila Vyasdev. He again instructed Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra said, no, I cannot. No, Dhritarashtra was not. Dhritarashtra was a son, right? Dhrit and Pandava. They were son of Vyasdev. He instructed, but he said, no, I cannot, destiny, etc., etc. He gave, destiny was his favorite excuse. And Vyasdevji got upset and he thought of leaving from there. And when he was leaving from that place, then he turned around and then he said, all right, Dhritarashtra, you still do not want to stop the war, although you are a king. You have all the right. You can declare whatever you want, and both the parties would have to abide you, yet you're not doing it. So let me give you a vision by which you can see all the horrors of the war by your own eyes. And that time Dhritarashtra said, no, I don't want to see. Then Vyasdev said, all right, if you don't want to see, I will give it to my disciple Sanjaya. And that's the time Srila Vyasadeva blessed Sanjaya. And that is how you see Bhagavad-Gita, where Sanjaya is speaking. Hare Krishna. I'm just going to mute disturbance. And that's how Sanjaya got the vision. So this Dhritarashtra was the actual culprit. And he had two famous excuses. One is of the destiny, and second is of love for Duryodhana. If I do not follow his condition, then my son would commit suicide or would kill himself, etc., etc. But in all this thing, although the actual doer was Dhritarashtra, but who got punished was always Duryodhana. So in a Bombay's language, Dhritarashtra was a mafia don. And Duryodhana was his puppet, was his face, who would perform actions as per the will of Dhritarashtra. Of course, Duryodhana was also having that inclination. To give you an example in a very simple form, don't mind, it's just a slight joke only. Maybe I can say in Hindi, if it's okay for those of you who understand Hindi. A long time ago, I heard it. And when I heard it, I was thinking, this really suits Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. And very interesting joke it was. And it was like, can I speak in Hindi? I hope it's okay. Those who don't understand Hindi, let me know, then I'll tell you it in English. Jokes are good in Hindi only. So, एक बार एक पिताजी अपने बेटे की लॉकर की तलाशी करते हैं. वहां पे जैकेट मिलती है. जैकेट खोल के देखते हैं, उसमें सिगरेट का पैकेट, शराब की बोतल, लड़कियों के कॉन्टेक्ट कार्ड्स निकलते हैं. पिताजी को बड़ा गुस्सा आता है. बेटे के कान के नीचे झपाझोर झापे पे झापा, बदमाश, कब से गलत हरकतें कर रहा है. और लड़का बेचारा पिटाई खाने के बाद रोते हुए बोलता है, पिताजी ये जैकेट तो आपकी है, मेरी नहीं है, आपकी है. So when I heard that, I was thinking, see, this is what Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. Poor Duryodhana always got pitai. He was beaten up. Gandharvas beat him up. And then Virat, at the end of the incognito, again, Arjuna single-handedly, he destroyed whole Kauravas army. Duryodhana was badly injured. Dhritarashtra was peacefully sitting on his throne. And he was like this, who was always putting blame here and there. So that was an interesting relationship between Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. Anyways, Dhritarashtra acted as a mafia don. There was a point to help you understand the relationship with Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. So Bhagavad-Gita, the very first verse begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha. What an auspicious beginning, actually. We were talking about it. So it tells us something about the cause of the war. Therefore, it began with Dhritarashtra. Why Bhagavad-Gita was spoken? The main person because of which this whole thing happened was Dhritarashtra, responsible. That's the whole point I was making it. Now, let's take a look at the very first line of the verse. Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetra. Can we go back to the presentation? Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetra. What is Bhagavad-Gita all about? If somebody asks you, what is that one thing Bhagavad-Gita teaches you? Of course, you can say Bhagavad-Gita teaches about Ishwar, teaches about Jiva, teaches about Kala, Karma, Prakriti. Fantastic. Those are the 5 main subjects. But there is something where you can say there is something which is literally inconspicuous, which binds all these 5 subject matters together. And what is that? Please pay attention to the very first syllable of the first verse. Dhritarashtra Vacha, not that, but Dharma Kshetre. Bhagavad-Gita begins, the very first syllable is Dha. I want you to go, if you have a copy of Bhagavad-Gita, 18th chapter, verse number 78, which is the last verse of Bhagavad-Gita. And what does Sanjay says? Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhute Dhruvani Termatir Mama. In conclusion, here Sanjay says, he gives his conclusion to Dhritarashtra when Dhritarashtra asks, what's your opinion? And Sanjay said, my dear Dhritarashtra, my opinion is wherever there is Yogeshwara, the king, the controller of all the yogic siddhi powers, Lord Shri Krishna, Dhanurdhari Arjuna, wherever these 2 personalities are available, there are 4 things. What is that? Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhuti. Shri means all opulences, Vijaya means victory. Bhuti means, great power. Dhruvam, certainly, Niti, morality, Matir Mama. That is my opinion. Like that, Sanjay makes his conclusion. And here comes the last syllable of Bhagavad-Gita. Mama. So you see the first syllable is Dha, and the last syllable is Ma. And the missing syllable, which Prabhupada, through his purpose, manifests, is Ra. And if you add these 3 syllables, that becomes Dharma. So Bhagavad-Gita teaches us Dharma. What is Dharma? And let me speak a little bit on this Dharma. Let me give you technical terminologies and then we'll talk about, okay, let me define Dharma first and then we'll give to the technical terminologies. In introduction, Srila Prabhupada quotes a conversation between Srila Sanatana Goswami and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, wherein Sanatana Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, my dear Lord, what is the constitutional position? What is the eternal situation of a living entity? What is my Dharma? What is the relationship between our eternal constitutional position and Dharma? So Srila Prabhupada explains, Dharma means something which is inseparable. For example, Dharma of salt, for that reason, is saltiness. For sugar, it is sweetness. For water, liquidity. When you heat up the water, water becomes vapor or vaporized. It is no more water. Similarly, when you solidify the water, it becomes ice. It is not more water. So the inseparable nature of a living entity is called as dharma. So what is the inseparable nature for a living entity? That is seva, to serve others. So the dharma of a living entity is serve, and we see that we call it as a symbiotic relationship between living entities, just like the human beings exhales carbon dioxide, plants inhale carbon dioxide and exhales oxygen, which we inhale. There is a constant relationship between us and the nature. By nature, I mean to say everything within the nature, every other living form like that. There's this relationship which exists. In other words, every one of us is serving. That is what is our position here is. So what is our dharma? Dharma means to serve. And that is the subject matter of Bhagavad-Gita, where Krishna, when Arjuna have decided that he is not going to perform his duty. Now that service can be translated in the form of duty. When Arjuna decides that he is not going to perform his duty, so Krishna says, no, you should. So dharma, you can call dharma as action. There are three kinds of actions. First is sinful action, which is called as Vikarma. Chapter 4 of Bhagavad-Gita will talk about, which is also called as adharma. Second action is a pious activity. It is also called as karma or called as dharma. And then there is a third kind of an activity, which is called as transcendental activity, which is called as akarma or parodharma. Are you getting it? Vikarma, karma, akarma. Adharma, dharma, parodharma. Sinful activity, pious activity, transcendental activity. And this is what the subject matter. So in the first chapter, we understand about Duryodhan, who has taken a side of adharma, who is bent on performing sinful activity. And from the first chapter, we understand Arjuna, who is trying to take shelter of dharma, pious activity. He says, if I fight in this war and if I have to kill my relatives, my elders, my guru, then I'll perform sinful activities. That is adharmic. So he takes a shelter of dharma. However, Lord Shri Krishna says, there is something beyond right and wrong. There is something beyond right action and wrong action, and that is called as transcendental action. And what is that transcendental action? Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adhok sachi ahitu ki apratihata sayatma suprasidhati. Parodharma, the sarvashesh dharma, is by which one develops the loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the message of Bhagavad-Gita is all about teaching us, first of all, how to become dutiful. Secondly, not only to remain dutiful, but also to become conscious of performing our duties that Krishna wants us to perform. Therefore, in third chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says, Yagna arthat karmano, anyatta karmano. What is that? Loko karma bandhana. 3.9, if I'm correct. Krishna makes a point. Very beautiful verse. Yagnarthat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartham karma kanteya mukta sangha samachara. Yagnarthat means Yagna Vishnu, Yagnavatar, Vishnu. If any work is performed not for the satisfaction of Vishnu, lokoyam karma bandhana, that binds the living entity. However, the work which is performed for the pleasure of Vishnu, mukta sangha samachara, that liberates the person. And therefore, in the same third chapter, it's not even the 18th chapter, third chapter, if you go into verse number 30, then Krishna says, Mai sarvani karamani, whatever you do, whatever actions you perform, sanyasya dhyatma chetasaha, sanyasya means giving up, adhyatma means having a full knowledge, chetasa, by consciousness, nirasa nirmamo bhutva, by giving up attachments for profit, adorations, or claims to proprietorship. Yudhyasva vigata jara. Jara means laziness. Yudhyasva vigata jara. Rise up, perform your duty. And that is what again and again Lord Shri Krishna iterates. But what duty? Not dharma. It is parodharma. the activity by which we are able to develop our relationship with the Lord. But how do we understand what is Parodharma? Parodharma can only be understood tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya updeshyanti te jnanam gnanina satvadarshana. Therefore, we cannot understand the subject matter of Bhagavad Gita without the help of Guru. This is what all in all Bhagavad Gita is all about. That tells us that the major message emphasized here. So the problem here, the problem with in general with the people of this world is just like Dhritarashtra, he always blamed it on destiny. Whatever destiny wants, that will happen. This is called as Daivavad. And there is another philosophy, which is a modern concept, not the modern concept is there, which is a modern notion these days, is Karmavad, work is worship. Bhagavad-Gita says, no, it is not Devavad. Bhagavad-Gita says, no, it is not Karmavad. How does you get a result in your life? Whatever action you perform, how do you get result? Those who say it is Daivavad, which Dhritarashtra always said, what happened? Such people becomes highly irresponsible. He never performed his duty as he was supposed to perform as a king. He could have chastised Duryodhana, he could have thrown him out of the kingdom, but he did not. He said, no, Daiva decides everything. You know what happened? When Sanjaya gave his conclusion to Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya described him how Krishna have taken a Virat Roop. He understood about the Virat Roop from Sanjaya. And then finally, Dhritarashtra, what is your conclusion after hearing Bhagavad Gita? The 78th shloka, when Sanjaya said, Pandavas are victorious for sure. And you saw how in Virat Roop, Krishna have already killed your whole army. You know what Dhritarashtra said, which was not part of Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata talks about it. Dhritarashtra said, oh, no problem. Maybe the destiny is not favoring my sons today, but destiny may change tomorrow. And tomorrow, if it favors, then whole situation would change. This is an example of highly irresponsible behavior. That is Daivavad. So Bhagavad Gita or Vedic philosophy does not promote Daivavad. And there's the other opposite end is Karmavad, where his work is worship, where Duryodhana thought, I, by my might, can become the king. You know, Mike Tyson, when he was an 18-year-old boy, when he won the world championship of boxing, he made a big statement on that evening press conference. He said, I am the youngest world champion, and I would become or remain the oldest world champion. After 10 years of his boxing career, he got Parkinson's disease. He struggled for several years. At the age of 35, he again announced his comeback. And 6 months down the line, his match was fixed with the world champion. Just a month before the match with the world champion, Mike Tyson called for another press conference and he said, I tried my best, but I am not fit for fighting anyone. I cannot. Hey, my video is gone. Oh, sorry, no, my video is on. I saw the chat message somewhere. Okay. What was I saying? So there is a karmavad which Duryodhana practiced. Duryodhana thought by my might, by my adjustment, by my diplomatic efforts, I can get the result that I want. So what happened in that case? Those who follow this work as worship concept, then they become very disheartened when they are a failure. But when they become victorious, then they become very proud. And that's what happened with Duryodhana. When Duryodhana got defeated by Gandharvas, he was totally disheartened. And when Duryodhana was victorious in some activity, then he was extremely proud that nobody is better than I. So Bhagavad Gita again rejects this both philosophy of Daivavad and Karmavad, because Karmavad philosophy induces insecurity, inferiority complex, envy for others. Because you think by effort, all of us can become successful and somebody else is successful. You think, oh, how can he be successful? Because that success was meant for me. And what is the formula of result that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita? Any result that happens in our life, there are three things. I'm telling you something right in the beginning, because some concepts are clear now, then you will see why Krishna is speaking something in a certain manner. Therefore, I'm speaking on this concept of Dharma right in the very first session. Because when Krishna begins to speak from the 39th verse about Buddhi Yoga, you see this subtle message going on again and again. So three things, any result that you get in your life, it depends on three things. So in Matsya Puran, Lord Matsya gives this example to Satyavrat Muni. He says, a farmer, when he sows the seed in the ground, he depends on the rainfall. Unless there is a rainfall, the seed cannot fructify. Even if there is a rainfall, it does not mean tomorrow morning you will get the fruit. then you depend on time. There are three things for any result to manifest: your action of sowing the seed, the destiny, the providence for the rainfall to happen, and then wait for Kal, time. When all three lines up together, that's the time we get a result. Therefore, the most important verse which is there in the second chapter, Karmana evadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan, is not a disempowering verse. It is the most empowering verse. Ma phaleshu kadachan, you have no right on your result, because out of these three factors, the only control you have is 1/3. That is on your action. Nobody can determine Daiva and nobody can fast track Kala. And the perfect example is Lord Ramchandra. When Mother Sita is kidnapped, he told the Sugriva's army, it's a season for monsoon, 4 months, let's wait. We cannot do anything. Lord Ramchandra taught Kala how it plays a very important thing. So that's the thing, how we get result in our life. And that is what you will see Krishna is telling Arjuna. Arjuna, perform your action. Perform your duty. Don't give it up. You do not dharma. You're talking about dharma, but you should focus on paradharma, because paradharma only liberates. Dharma and adharma both binds the living entity. So that's a little background to this whole subject matter, the core philosophy, because a lot of time people blame Bhagavad-Gita as a book which generates artificial renunciation. No, after reading Bhagavad-Gita, I don't know. That's the reason I said Bhagavad-Gita is the best self-help book. Krishna is the original motivational speaker who motivates you to rise up and perform your duty, become responsible, become accountable, not that we become lazy. So I don't know from where this kind of wrong conceptions people have got, that if you read Bhagavad-Gita, young people will read Bhagavad-Gita, they'll give up their duties. No, it only makes them responsible. So going back again to the first verse, Dharma Kshetre, so it talks about Dharma. That was the whole secret here. Now, the rest of this whole verse is very interesting. But before that, let's take a look on the subject matter of name a little bit. Yes, I said Dhritarashtra. So here in Bhagavad-Gita, you'll see there are different names. First of all, just like along with this first chapter, talks about the mindset, tells us about what's the situation of Arjuna, Duryodhana, etc. It also introduces us with the Vedic culture. These days, people have names like Tommy, Poppy, Tinky, Pinky, which are meaningless, isn't it? Now, earlier, whatever name people had, not earlier, even particularly in Tamil Nadu places, literally everyone has name after Krishnan. Krishnan Swami, Siddharth Krishna, this Krishna, that Krishna, very interesting names, and some places in Telugu also. So these names had a great meaning. So let's briefly take a look at it. Slide deck, please. So we gave a meaning of Dhritarashtra. Let's take a case, Yudhishthar. Yudh, war, sthir, one who is steady in war, one who does not lose his control and ability to make decisions. That is called Yudhishthar. Arjuna, the another meaning of Arjuna is one with a spotless character. That is called Arjuna. Dronacharya, drone. When you go to ISKCON temple, you get food for life, khichdi in drone. That is drone, okay? So Dronacharya, he was born on a drone or a leaf cup. That's how his name was Drona. And later on, when he became Acharya, he called Drona Acharya. All right. Then Bhima. Bhim, Vrakodara would be the word used later on in this first chapter, which means one who eats a lot and does a powerful task. And above all, Duryodhan. Now, there is a point that Duryodhan from the childhood did not have such a wonderful name. No parents will name their son as Dur. Dur means Durgati. Dur means inauspicious. Dur means, it can have different meanings. Let's take one meaning. Duryodhan. Yudh, fight. Duryodhan, one meaning of Duryodhan is who is very difficult to fight. So once when our Balramji was visiting Janakji's palace, what is that place in Nepal? Janak Maharaj, where Mother Sita was. Mithila. When Balramji was once, this whole episode is after that. What is that episode? Satyabhama, the jewel pastime. After this, Balramji came to Mithila, and there Duryodhan went and met from Hastinapur. And that time Duryodhan and Balaramji stayed together, and Duryodhan had learned the art of mace fighting from Balaramji. And that's how since then he became Duryodhan, the one who is almost impossible to be defeated. Another meaning of Duryodhan, I said, Dur means inauspicious. So sometimes people say, no, his name from beginning was not Duryodhan, his name was Suyodhan. Later on he became Duryodhan. Anyways, the words have great meaning like that. Fine, we'll see that in this chapter when we move forward, particularly for Krishna and Arjuna. Time and again, the different words are used with a very in-depth meaning. So I've already described about the first syllable and the last syllable and the rest, the meaning of this Bhagavad Gita with R like that. Now let's take a look at the verse a little bit. What is Dharma? I have already spoken, isn't it? That we have discussed about it. So if you take a look at the verse, very interesting. What is Dhritarashtra is saying? He's saying Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. He is referring to Kurukshetra as Dharma Kshetra. Why? Because this is the place where the Kuru Vamsha had performed sacrifices and being pleased. This Kurukshetra is a place which was named after Kuru, one of the great ancestors of Kuru Vamsha. This has happened in Treta Yuga long ago. That's how Kurukshetra place became. And there were many kings, in that dynasty, and many sages performed many religious sacrifices. And therefore, this place became a Dharma Kshetra. And now the Dhritarashtra, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, Samavet, Yusava. Samavet means coming together. Yusava, desiring to fight. So very interesting question. Dhritarashtra is saying, my sons and Pandu's sons, desiring to fight, have assembled in Kurukshetra. What did they do? But obvious, they would fight now. If there is a cricket team who has gone to the cricket stadium and the toss have already happened, what do you think? Are they going to have a lunch break or what? They're going to play cricket. So why is he asking this question? So Acharyas give a commentary on it about the mindset. If you go into the purpose, Prabhupada mentions in the very last paragraph, what was the mindset of Dhritarashtra behind it? Dharma Kshetra being a pious place, Dhritarashtra was worried it should not happen. For example, when you go ISKCON temple, often you would have an experience that there is a change of consciousness. Environment affects you. Similarly, when you go to an office, then again there is a change of consciousness. Environment affects you. Yes or no? You get affected, isn't it? Similarly, Dhritarashtra was worried. Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra, when my sons and the Pandu sons would have assembled at this Dharma Bhumi known as Kurukshetra, how it would influence. See, as I said, the mastermind was Dhritarashtra. So first thing he's worried was, it should not happen my sinful son gets positively affected by the auspicious environment of Kurukshetra, and then he might feel, oh, what is the need? After all, he's my elder brother. Okay, he wants 5 villages? Let me give 5 villages. So Dhritarashtra didn't want that. Other reason for which he asked, maybe Yudhishthira Maharaj may have a change of heart, and he may get affected thinking that, why should I fight? Why should I become the cause of death of so many? Let me go to the forest. So these were different reasons. Prabhupada mentioned, you can read in detail why Dhritarashtra asked this question, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra. And last point on this, Mamaka Pandava Chaiva. Prabhupada says this also indicates a mindset of Dhritarashtra. In other words, it very clearly makes a point that who was responsible for the war? Dhritarashtra, because Kauravas, Pandu's son, were as much as Kauravas as Dhritarashtra's sons, because they all were Kuru Vamsha. But what Dhritarashtra says, Mamaka, mere putra, or Pandu ke putra. He always had that decisive mentality or separatist mentality. He never accepted. Why? Because he was too attached to his position of being a king as Dhritarashtra. Therefore, that's a point here to begin with. So now, what does Sanjaya says? Going back to the slide, please. Let's take a look. We discuss about the mindset like that. Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre. And let's take a look at the purport actually. Something very interesting going to happen. As the Dhritarashtra Vacha has a lot of in-depth meaning, the shloka has Prabhupada's purpose. I would like you to please pay attention to the very first 2 lines of the most important text Bhagavad-Gita, there's going to be something very, very special here. Please take a look. We're going to split it up. Let's see. I'm going to focus on the first two lines here. The very first line of Prabhupada's purpose says, Bhagavad-Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. No, why don't we have a slide deck here? Why are we showing the Veda base here? Yeah, have the slide deck only, please. So Bhagavad-Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. What does it mean? First of all, Prabhupada says theistic. Theistic means it teaches us about God. It tells us who we are and what's the relationship. It's a science. Science means it's a knowledge which can be practically verified. That's what it means, science. And then Prabhupada says, summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. This whole Bhagavad Gita is summarized in Gita Mahatmya. Does anyone know what is Gita Mahatmya here? We can take off the screen here and let's ask somebody. Prabhupada says the whole summary of Bhagavad-Gita can be found in Gita Mahatmya. What is Gita Mahatmya? Anshul Prabhu, let's hear from you. Go ahead.
So probably, what I got to know was that Prabhupada initially kind of published a summary of Bhagavad-Gita. So is he referring to that summary as Gita Mahatmya? Otherwise, Gita Mahatmya is also separate, I think mentioned in Skand Puran,
Padma Puran.
Padma Puran, Gita Mahatmya.
Conversation between Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati, right?
Yeah.
So I read through that several times, but I did not find anything which you can call it as summary of Bhagavad-Gita is mentioned. In other words, the conclusion or the summary of Bhagavad-Gita being mentioned is not there actually. It's about for every chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, there is a story. How, if you read this chapter, how it will benefit you. Okay? Something very important. We have Mohan Gopal Prabhu. Mohan Gopal Prabhu, please go ahead. Unmute yourself.
So Prabhuji, I thought that first of all, this Gita Mahatmya, it also comes in Varaha Puran. This is again this between the Mother Earth and Vishnu. They both are discussing this in Varaha Puran.
Okay.
And there is another thing which came into my mind is that Adi Shankaracharya, he has also written this Gita Mahatmya.
Actually, Prabhupada is indicating about Adi Shankaracharya's written Gita Mahatmya.
Yes.
Let's pay attention. Something very interesting is mentioned there. Thank you, Prabhu. Can we go back to the slide here? So, is summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. So, is summarized in the Gita Mahatmya. Before we get into summarizing the Gita Mahatmya, what is the summary of Bhagavad-Gita? What is the summary of Bhagavad-Gita? And let me show you what is a summary of Bhagavad-Gita. Can I have my slide of Veda base, please? Is visible? No, Veda base dikhaiye. I have to do duplicate. All right. Okay. So the concluding verse, if you say what is the Paribhasha Sutra of Bhagavad-Gita in that sense, what is the conclusion or summary of Bhagavad-Gita? All of you agree, is this? Sarva dharman parityajamam ekam sharanam vaja aham tam sarva papebhyo mokshashyami masuchaha. Is that correct? I don't know. I can't see any one of them now. So fine. I hope you all are agreeing to that. This is the concluding verse. And in this concluding verse, oh, I highlighted it. Where did it go? Yes. I actually had highlighted these portions, but somehow it went. Are you able to see this? Yeah, good enough. So would anyone like to read? Please read out the highlighted portion. What is the summary of Bhagavad-Gita? I cannot see any one of you, so I'll request our admins to unmute any of the participants and they can read out what they see on the screen, please.
Yes, Prabhuji, I'll read.
Yes.
Now, in summarizing Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord says that Arjuna should give up all the processes that have been explained to him. He should simply surrender to Krishna. That surrender will save him from all kinds of sinful reactions, for the Lord personally promises to protect him.
Thank you. We can take off the screen sharing. So, yeah. So, the summary of Bhagavad-Gita is to surrender to Krishna. Do you all agree now? And if we surrender to Krishna, what happens? Moksha Shami Mahasuchaha. Lord Shri Krishna will take away set us free from all sinful reactions. And Master Krishna says, do not worry. Now, question arises, what is surrender? How do I surrender? Krishna says, surrender. What do I surrender? How do I surrender? Isn't it? And most importantly, let's go back to the slide deck. Where is our PPT? Prabhupada says the same summary is given in Gita Mahatmya. So we'll like to read Gita Mahatmya here. And it's something which I really love. This is a very profound point here. So I'm going to show there are 7 shlokas. So we all can recite together to save time. And then I'll show you which verse, or maybe I can ask you, you can read the translation also and tell me in which verse do you think the summary of Bhagavad-Gita is given, okay? So let's read this shlokas of Gita Mahatmya. Gita Shastram idam punyam yapate prayatam puman Vishnuhu padam avapnoti bhaya shokadivajita. In essence, one who follows the instructions of Bhagavad-Gita, he will certainly be freed from all the miseries, fear, anxieties, etc., etc. Then, second shloka of our, Gita Mahatmya. Gita Dhyayana Shilasya Pranayama Parasya Cha Naiva Santihi Papani Purva Janma Kritani Cha. If one reads Bhagavad-Gita very sincerely with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, the reaction of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. Text number 3. Maline mochanam pumsan jalasnanam dine dine sakrit gitamritam snanam samsara malanashinam. Just like when you want to get rid of the dirt from your body, you take a snan, you purify yourself from the water. Similarly, someone takes bath in the sacred Ganges water of Bhagavad-Gita. For him, the dirt of material life is altogether removed. Text number 4. Gita sugita kartavya kim anya shastra vistare. You don't have to read any other shastra. Gita is more than sufficient. Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya. Why? Because it is spoken by Swayam Padmanabhasya. Lord Krishna personally spoken. Mukha Padmadvinhe. So thus, what is the need of studying any other scripture? Bharat Amrita Sarvasma Vishnu Vaktaradvinistritam Gita Ganguta Kampitva Punarjanmana Vityate. One who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So what to speak of one who brings the nectar of Bhagavad-Gita. Bhagavad-Gita is the essential nectar of Bhagavad-Gita and is spoken by Lord Shri Krishna himself. And the last 2 verses. Sarvopanishado gavo dukta gopala nandana parto vassa sudhir bhokta dugdam gitam ritam mahat. So among all the scriptures, Bhagavad-Gita is like a cow, which gives the nectar milk, where Krishna is a cowherd man who milks the cow, and Vatsa, Arjuna is like a calf. When Arjuna is brought near, and then Krishna milks the cow like that, which is all the scriptures. And what comes out as a milk is the message of Bhagavad-Gita. Very beautiful verse this is actually. And the last verse, Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantra Tasya Namani Yani Karmapi Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva. One Shastra, one mantra, one Deva, ityadi ityadi. In essence, there is one Lord, there is one mantra, there is one scripture, that is Bhagavad-Gita. Like that, this is the concluding verse. So in case if I ask you, where do you think the summary of Bhagavad-Gita is given? What's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Where? Mother Kamlika, your hand is up. Go ahead. Unmute.
Yes, 7, last one.
7, okay. Mother Rati Manjri.
It's the Upanishad is the cow, Lord Krishna is the cowherd.
Okay, that's where you say, fine. Just tell me the number. Quick. You all can type in the chat box. Whoever has got unmuted, I don't know, there are a couple of hands up. Sandeep Prabhu, go ahead.
7, Prabhuji, 7.
Okay, 7. Kumareshan Prabhu. So largely people are saying, devotees are saying 6 and 7, but actually, where in Bhagavad-Gita, Gita Mahatmya, please come back on the slide deck. Gita Mahatmya, the summary of Bhagavad-Gita is given. I'm going to make it into the tabular format. Please pay attention. I can't do animation here, so let's focus our attention on promised. Oh, why it is not coming? Pointer options. Laser. Okay, anyways, sorry. So promised fruit. I hope you're able to see my cursor moving, right? That's visible on the screen. Okay, no problem. So please pay attention to the last column, promised fruit. 18.66, Krishna says, I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Similarly, in Gita Mahatmya 2, Krishna says, Shankaracharya says, by the grace of the Lord, the reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon. Are you seeing the same result, right? The same result. So if you now have to read the required action, 18.66, Krishna says, if you surrender unto me, I shall deliver you. And in Gita Mahatmya 2, Shankaracharya says, if one reads Bhagavad-Gita very sincerely with all seriousness, it looks like, it may seem like that they are different. In other words, surrendering to Krishna and reading Bhagavad-Gita looks like there are two different things, but actually that is not the case. Surrendering to Krishna means to read Gita with all sincerity, with all seriousness. So what is my surrender? Prabhupada, right? Bhagavad-Gita is summarized in Gita Mahatmya, and that is the verse number 2 where it is said, study Bhagavad-Gita very sincerely and seriously. And now please pay attention, if you still are not getting the clue, what is the second line that Prabhupada writes in the purport? So I hope this is clear so far. The surrender means that Krishna says, Sarva Dharman, give up everything, surrender to me, is to study Bhagavad-Gita scrutinizingly, very seriously. Now, what does it mean? Let's take a look. Go back to the slide again. The second line, please, you can take a look in your purport also. What is the next line Prabhupada writes in the purport? Prabhupada says, there it says, now where it says, where it has been summarized, right? Which means the text number 2 of Gita Mahatmya, that one should read Bhagavad-Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Shri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. Let me show you verse again. Gita Adhyan Shilasya Pranayam Parasya Cha Naiva Shantihi Papani Purva Janma Kritani Cha. If one reads Bhagavad-Gita very sincerely, Prabhupada says, therein it is mentioned, one should read Bhagavad-Gita very scrutinizingly. So our surrender to Krishna, how does surrender to Krishna happens? All of us in our life have to take this message, this wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita very seriously. Now the question arises, how do we study Bhagavad-Gita? How can I study Bhagavad-Gita? And Srila Prabhupada unpacks it. The same verse here, of which Srila Prabhupada is referring, Prabhupada gives 4 tips in his second line of the purport, how to read Bhagavad-Gita. First, scrutinizingly. Please, you can check out your purport if Prabhupada writes or not, in the very second line. One should read Bhagavad-Gita scrutinizingly. Scrutinizingly, right now I'm giving an example of scrutinizingly studying Bhagavad-Gita, where you're paying attention to the line, what it means and how it relates. So that is called as scrutinizing. It cannot happen by our 1 reading or 2 reading. It requires multiple readings. Second, Prabhupada says Bhagavad-Gita should be understood with the help of a devotee. First of all, we should hear Bhagavad-Gita and then we can, really study it well. Third, we should try to understand it. And fourth, without materially motivated interpretations. And here lies the whole beauty of Srila Prabhupada's purport. The verse is about Dhritarashtra Vacha. And the very first 2 lines of the purport, Prabhupada have given the conclusion of Bhagavad-Gita. And what is the conclusion of Bhagavad-Gita? Surrender to Krishna. And how do we surrender to Krishna? By scrutinizingly studying Bhagavad-Gita under the guidance or tutelage of a devotee of the Lord. This is an expanded view of the same table. The promised fruit, required action we have spoken about. So finally, promised fruit, Krishna's protection, which Krishna says, Ma Sucha, do not worry, I shall protect you. How will you get that Krishna's protection? Prabhupada unpacks in the second line of the purport says, one should read Bhagavad-Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Shri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. And this is the beauty of Srila Prabhupada's purports. Right in the beginning, Prabhupada has given the whole essence. So with that, at this point of time, I will pause. Is 1:10. As a part of our revised schedule, we'll have a 7-minute break, which means around 1:17 we'll return back, and then we'll continue. I do understand I gave good amount of time and attention to the first verse, but trust me, this is not how we're going to read every verse. So Bhagavad-Gita will become a lifetime project. I just wanted you to a little bit get settled with it. Some important concepts I have already discussed to create a background, so that as you move forward, you have some background with how the discussion is happening. Otherwise, second chapter onwards, devotees many times complain that it's just not making sense what's happening here. So we will get that clarity that way. So in case if anyone would have any questions or clarification, you can kindly hold it on to it. Once we come back after 7 minutes break, when we probably end by 2 to 5, and then in the end, we'll give you 10 to 15 minutes for asking questions. All right, to conclude, for the first part of this program, we discussed what is Bhagavad-Gita, what is the need of Bhagavad-Gita, the practical application of Bhagavad-Gita, what is the importance of chapter 1, despite Bhagavad-Gita begins in chapter 2, in the sense Lord Shri Krishna begins speaking from chapter 2, but how chapter 1 is very important. Who was the culprit? In other words, why did Bhagavad-Gita begin with the Dhritarashtra Vacha, not Krishna Vacha? But just to set a point, the responsible person for the war was Dhritarashtra. Duryodhan was a puppet for Dhritarashtra. We described the relationship between Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan. Then we also spoke about the point about what is the key message of Bhagavad-Gita is Dharma. What is Dharma? Dharma are 3 kinds: Adharma, Dharma, Parodharma. In essence, Dharma means inseparable identity of a living entity, and that is service. And then we talked about the mindset of the Dhritarashtra behind asking a question: what happened when they assembled to fight? He was worried about the influence of Dharma Kshetre. And second point, his way of saying Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva shows and proves his separatist mentality. So like that, in first verse, we discussed that. And then we looked into the purport, the first 2 lines, where Prabhupada says Bhagavad-Gita is a theistic science, is a science of God. So science means which is verifiable, and it's about God. It proves, it establishes the concept of God and relationship with God. And then Prabhupada says a summary of Bhagavad-Gita is given in Gita Mahatmya. What is a summary of Bhagavad-Gita? Surrender to Krishna. And what will happen? Krishna will protect you. But summary of Bhagavad-Gita is also given in Gita Mahatmya. When we went to Gita Mahatmya, then we understood Adi Shankaracharya says, one who studies Bhagavad-Gita scrutinizingly, then that person gets freed from all the sinful reactions. So what does surrender means? How do we get Krishna's protection? That only happens when person studies Bhagavad-Gita seriously and sincerely. It should be a constant companion for devotees, and that's how we get Krishna's protection. Otherwise, how do we surrender? How do we quantify surrender? So Prabhupada makes a point. The summary of Bhagavad-Gita is also given in Gita Mahatmya. And then Prabhupada says on the very next line, how to understand this Bhagavad-Gita? 4 things. Scrutinizingly study, hear it from a devotee, try to understand it. And the 4th point that Prabhupada mentions, do not study with personally motivated interpretation, or do not have your personally motivated interpretations interfering with the words of Lord Shri Krishna. And to the degree we are able to do it, to that degree we understand Master Bhagavad-Gita, to that degree we have Krishna's protection of life. And like that, study of Bhagavad-Gita is so and so important. Hare Krishna. So with that, we pause here. Now, because it's 1:30, summary took 4 minutes. So your break goes up to 1:20. All right. We'll come back at 1:20. And till then, those who are around, they can hear nice Kirtan of Srila Prabhupada.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare
Recording
Krishna,
stop.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare.
Yes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So can we go back to the slide? So surrendering to Krishna, which is the conclusion of Bhagavad-Gita, means to read Gita sincerely and with all seriousness. This summary is given in Gita Mahatmya. As Prabhupada says, Bhagavad-Gita is summarized in Gita Mahatmya. And if you take a look at the summary of Bhagavad-Gita, that matches entirely with the second verse. So the action and response, not the action response, action and the fruit. Fruit is same, we get freed from all sinful activities and results. But the action was different. Their action referred to in Bhagavad-Gita surrender. And Adi Shankaracharya said in that verse, scrutinizingly, studying Bhagavad-Gita seriously. So it means surrender to Krishna means understanding Krishna's instructions, following and abiding by it. Then only surrender can happen actually. It all begins with studying Bhagavad-Gita. I really like this point actually. This was shared by one of Srila Prabhupada's disciple. This is Mataji, who had written this article long ago. And she shared her own personal experience where she said that, she had been struggling. She and her husband had been struggling. They were temple presidents, did all those services and all that. They were going through a lot of ups and downs in their life. And back in 2005 or somewhere around before that, she was reading this. And then she began to think, what does Prabhupada mean here? And then once she understood this, she writes that even she and her husband were having a difficulty in relationship at that point of time. And then when she understood this message of surrender in this context, she mentions that they began to read Bhagavad-Gita every day. They overcame their personal relationship issues. Then they also overcame their professional issues that they were facing. And within few years, everything came back on track. And that's what she says, Krishna's protection is guaranteed because I have personally experienced it. So it is based on the article. I'm missing out the name. I'm sorry for that. I'll let you know what was the name of this. I believe this particular couple is from London only. So I'll let you know that, who had written this article. Fine. So let's move ahead. What did and how did Sanjay responded to Dhritarashtra's inquiry? Or what did Pandavas, Mamaka Pandavas, Chai, what did they do? So let's take a look. So in text number 2, text number 12, Sanjay chooses to speak about Dhritarashtra's sons, Duryodhana and Duryodhana's army. Because Dhritarashtra was worried, did my sons choose for compromise with Pandavas or not? And Sanjay in text number 2, he confirms, he assures no, not at all. And he describes what Duryodhana did at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So let's take a look. Text number 2. I hope all of you have your notebook. It will be nice. We can recite verses together. Sanjavacha drashvatu pandavanikam vyudham duryodhanastada acharyam upasangamya raja vachanam abravit. Drashvatu pandavanikam, Sanjay says, at that point of time, Duryodhana saw the whole army of Pandavas. Vyudham duryodhanas tada. Vyudham prepared to fight. Duryodhanas tada. So what did Duryodhana did at that time? Acharyam upasangamya. He approached his teachers. Raja vachanam bravit. And the king spoke the words. So it's very interesting. Why Sanjay calling Raja vachanam abravit? The king spoke the words. So there are two ways. One is Sanjay is saying, "O king," Duryodhana did like this. And another Acharya explains that Sanjay was indicating Duryodhana to be king. So, so here Acharya mentioned that he was using a sarcastic language. He wanted to assure Dhritarashtra by saying the word Racha Vachanam Abravit, that King Duryodhana spoke these words, which means whatever happened, Duryodhana is bent on becoming a king. In no condition, nothing is going to change him. So Sanjay wanted to make a point. My dear king, you have been blind from your childhood. But your son, despite having an eyesight, is blind. Maybe more blind than you. Nothing can change him. That is the message which is going on here. So what happened when Duryodhana saw? When Duryodhana saw Pandava's army, he got frightened. And therefore he decided to go and speak to his teachers. Let's read text number 3 and then I'll describe the reason for his fear. Text number 3. Pashyetam Panduputranam. Do you see? Do you see? He tells his teachers, Panduputranam Acharya Mahatam Chamam. Do you see Acharya? He is referring to Dronacharya. Mahatim Chamam. Look at this great military army that they have brought and how they have arranged this whole huge army. Vyudham, which means arranged. Drupada Putrena. Do you know Acharya were? Who have arranged this army of Pandavas? Drupad Putrena. Drupad Putrena is Drishtadumna, Drupa's son. Drishtadumna, the one who is born to kill you, also happens to be your student. In other words, so two things we'll get to see from here, Duryodhana's usage of words. First is his diplomacy, and second is insecurity and fear. Duryodhana got really frightened. He never thought Vanvasi, Pandavas were Vanvasi, living in forest for 12 plus years. Does anyone know why Pandavas were given 12 plus 1 year and Lord Ramchandra was given how many years of Vanvas? How many? Write down, you can send a message. 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, 13 or 14 years. So why Lord Ram was given 14-year Vanvas? And why did Pandavas were given 12-year Vanvas? Their 12-year Vanvas. 1 year was incognito. So there was not Vanvas. So why Pandavas were given 12 years? The answer is, when you send a person for example, if somebody is less than 50, when Lord Ram was sent to forest, he was 25-year-old. So if a person less than 50-year-old is exiled to forest for 14 years, it means you're dead. It actually is a declaration to the society that he is no more. He cannot come back now. Now, why Yudhishthira Maharaj was given 12 years of Vanvas? Because Yudhishthira Maharaj was of the age of around 60, 70. He was above 50. Those who are over 50, if they were exiled to the forest for 12 years, that means they're not coming back. So Duryodhana was so shocked. He said, from where did these people got such a big sena? They were wandering in the forest and last year was an incognito. From where did they got such a big flanks of armies? I have a huge Narayani Sena with me, my own Sena of Hastinapur. And Duryodhana is really frightened. So in text number 3, he's expressing that fear by poking Drupad, by poking Dronacharya, saying that, my dear Acharya, do you see your foolishness? The one who was born to kill you, you claim to be a great Acharya, but you're fool number 1 because you taught the same person who's going to kill you. So in other words, he's kind of reminding Dronacharya that, fight vigorously. Otherwise, you'll be killed by Drishtadumna. Like that happens here. And you know the whole story. I'm not going to get into the stories here. Otherwise, chapter 1 would never end if you start getting into what's the background stories here. And then text number 4. Then Duryodhana says, Atra Sura Mahishu Asha Bhima Arjuna Samayudhi Yudhano Viratascha Drupadascha Maharata. This is text number 4 of Bhagavad-Gita. And then he says, here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna, like great fighters. He says then, but don't worry. In my army also there are great fighters like Yudhan, Virat, and Drupad. Sorry. He's making a point that in the Pandavas army, equivalent to Bhima and Arjuna, there are many great fighters like Yudhan, Virat, and Drupad. They are great fighters who have assembled at the side of Pandavas. Text number 5. Drashtaketu Chekitana Kashirajascha Viryavan Purujit Kundi Bhojascha Shebhyascha Narapungavaha. And there are also great heroic powerful fighters like Drashtaketu, Chekitan, Kashiraj, Purujit, Kuntibhoj, and Shebhya. He is counting the great warriors from the army of Pandavas. Now, what was the mindset of the Duryodhana's army? What's happening here? And something interesting happened in text number 7. The great diplomatic or political person Duryodhana from text number 7 becomes a motivational speaker. And now he begins to give inspiration and motivate his army by counting the great warriors. So all of you, do not get fearful seeing the huge army of Pandavas. Actually, he is indicating his own fear. And now he motivates the Kauravas army. Text number 7. Asmakam tu vishishtaye tan nibodadu juttama. Well, Madan, we can share the screen, the verses, when we're reading it. Naeka mama sainasya samagnatham tam bravimite. But all of your information, let me tell you about the captains who are especially qualified to lead my military force. Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha Kripascha Samitim Jaya Ashwathama Vikarnascha Saumadatta Tathaivacha. There are personalities like you, Dronacharya, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashwathama, Vikarna, and the son of Somadatta called Bhurishava, who are always victorious in battle. 2 points to be noted here. First is, if you take example of Kaurava's family, or let me put it this way, if you are ever asked to speak about brotherhood, a family where brothers never fought with each other, then the only example you can give is of Kauravas. There is not even a single incident where Duryodhan had a fight with his brothers. Now you take a case of Pandavas, they also had a lot of arguments, a lot of difference of opinion. Agreed? But whereas in the case of Kauravas, they never had a difference of opinion. They all followed whatever Duryodhana said. Now, this is something very interesting. Does it mean the Kauravas are having a greater character, whereas Pandavas are not of that character and caliber? Matter of fact is, when there are some selfish purposes to be fulfilled, or in other words, when there is a short-term goal, you know that if I cooperate, I would get it soon, then people are willing to transcend some temporary inconveniences. Just like a low-hanging fruit versus high-hanging fruit. You know that there's a low-hanging fruit, you can easily get it. So let's cooperate. Why to struggle? Because it's easy. It's a short-term goal. I can see it. So in the case of Kauravas, that was the whole thing. That's why people are all together for their own selfish motivations. Why I say so selfish motivation? Karna is very interesting personality because name of Karna is mentioned here. So I want to give a due credit to Karna. He requires a little justification. If I don't speak about Karna, Karna may get upset with me also. Like he got upset with Bhishma before the war. How dare don't take my name in Maharathis? You old man, you always insult me. So when Bhishma Pitama was counting the great warriors at the side of Kauravas, the Maharathis, he took name of everyone, but he did not address Karna. Karna got really insulted. He said, how dare you don't count me? And Bhishma, to add little extra spice on his wound, he said, Karna, you're not even Adirathi. Forget about Maharathi. And Arjuna, and Karna became so upset. And that time he said, I take a vow. Unless this old man is standing on his feet, I will not enter the battlefield. And Duryodhana like, Arey bhai, kahai lad rahe ho? The fight has not started on the battlefield. And the fight within our camp has already started. You're throwing water on my hopes. Please don't fight. And Karna said, what to do? I've already taken a vow. So I just want to make sure Karna doesn't become upset. So I would like to make a few points. Otherwise, he'll feel, you spoke about Bhishma, Drona, everyone. You didn't spoke about me. So Karna, generally people call him Danveer, isn't it? Hare Krishna. Can we just disable the chat? Why are there so many chats going on here? So those who are feeling sleepy, they need to type in something, I guess. So they're having some good, nice chatting session here. So I've disabled the chat only. So it's not a chatting session. You have to hear. All right. What was I saying about? Danveer Karna. All of you have heard about? How many of you actually believe, or you will say, with whatever understanding at this point in time, that Karna was really Danveer? Please raise your hand. Karna was a Danveer. If those of you are not raising your hand, I'm going to call out your names, okay? Okay, now घबराहट के हमारे सबके हाथ खड़े हो रहे हैं. You better have a good reason, otherwise why you're not raising your hand? There are books written about how Karna was Danveer. Now, before I come to his story of Karna was Danveer, I'll put a point. I would say more greater Danveer than Karna was Duryodhan. Only we have not glorified Duryodhan enough. And let me take an opportunity to glorify Duryodhan today. 8th day of the evening of the Battle of Kurukshetra is a very fascinating subject matter, the 18 days of war. And the 8th evening, Duryodhana was so perturbed and so disturbed what's going on the battlefield. He came and told Bhishma. What happened? Bhishma in the very beginning had taken a vow that I'm not going to kill Pandavas. So he was just playing, little softly he was playing with Pandavas, not killing. So Duryodhana became very agitated and he really instigated the Kshatriya spirit of Bhishma, and Bhishma being agitated and disturbed, he took a vow and he chanted a mantra and empowered 5 arrows, saying that Duryodhana, I've empowered these 5 arrows and tomorrow I'm going to kill all the 5 Pandavas. And Duryodhana was like, Hari bol, the war is ending tomorrow. And just to be doubly sure that Bhishma Pitama does not reverse the mantra, he said, please give me the arrows. I'll keep it securely with me. And he took those 5 arrows, went to his camp, went to his tent to stay there and spend a night. Lord Shri Krishna, Sarvasya Chaham Hidi Sanni Vishnu Matahaspatam Jnanam Apohanam. He resides in the heart of every living entity. Krishna told Arjuna, Arjuna, do you remember when you defeated Gandharvas and rescued Duryodhana? Duryodhana at that point of time said, my dear younger brother, I am so pleased by your service. I give you a benediction. Ask anything. And Arjuna said, I don't need anything from you. I don't ask anything from beggars. Right now I have saved your life. You should ask benediction from me. You can't give me benediction. So nonetheless, Arjuna said, well, in future we'll see. So Krishna said, now it's the time for you to go and ask for benediction. So as soon as Duryodhana came, just behind him came Arjuna. And Duryodhana said, oh, Arjuna, what a nice surprise. How come you are here today evening? What have brought you here? Have you come to ask me for your kingdom? You are my younger brother. If you say so, I can return your kingdom now. Arjuna said, no, that anyways will get it. And we are a Kshatriya, will fight and will get it. I have not come to ask you for that. So Duryodhana said, so why have you come? And then Arjuna said, see, please understand, the whole destiny of war of Kurukshetra was dependent on those 5 arrows. Tomorrow evening, by tomorrow night, just within less than 24 hours, Duryodhana would be undisputed king of the whole world. And his greatest enemies, 5 Pandavas, will be wiped off of this planet. And Arjuna said, Duryodhana, do you know? You've given me a vow or a benediction that I can ask you for something. Now, let's little bit look into our context. We say so many things to so many people. And when it is our time to fulfill, then we say, who are you? Did I ever said that? How many of us has that experience that we sometimes forget what we said to others, what promises we give to others, right? Look at the greatness of Duryodhana's character. When Arjuna said, it is my time to ask you for a blessing, Duryodhana said, what do you want? Give me those 5 arrows. What did Duryodhana said? You can take it, but can you please tell me, how did you got to know what those 5 arrows? At that time also Duryodhana did not say no. Duryodhana said, take it. But my dear Arjuna, can I know, how did you got to know about these 5 arrows? And Arjuna said, Krishna told me. Now who is bigger Danvir? Tell me. Is Karna bigger Danvir or Duryodhana bigger Danvir? Here, Karna could have killed only one Arjuna. Here, Duryodhana had an opportunity to get all the 5 brothers killed. Long story short, I don't know what Duryodhana was thinking. Duryodhana was thinking, Ghar ki keti. मंत्र तो उच्चारण करा है, भीष्म पितामह बाणों की कमी थोड़ा है, अगला मंत्र उच्चारण करके 5 और बाणों को empower कर देंगे. Maybe he was thinking like that. So he went running to, no, he didn't went actually. It was the next morning when Bhishma Pitama asked, Bhishma, where are the 5 arrows? And Duryodhana said, what can I do? Arjuna came and took it away. And then the 9th day happened when, Bhishma decided, I'll break the vow of Krishna. So think about it. Who is greater than Danvir? And Karna is glorified like anything. And Karna was not a Danvir. A matter of fact was, Surya Dev, his father, had appeared in a dream before Indra was supposed to come as a Brahmin, and he told him. And first of all, Karna had taken a vow, when I do my Gayatri, offer my prayers and worship to Surya Devta, and when I come out from the river, if at that point of time any Brahmin comes, I will not go against my words. I would fulfill whatever he wants. Please understand the culture at that point of time. People would stay true to their vow. If a person like Duryodhana could stay true to his vow, who's said to be the biggest demoniac person, so and that's the reason he fulfilled. It was his commitment. Of course, there are details to it. It will take a time, so I'll not go into the more stories here. So here, I was making a point: who is greater? Danvir. Now, another interesting thing that text number 8 you will see is Vikarna is mentioned. Now, you talk about Bhishma, you talk about Kripacharya, you talk about Karna, everything makes sense. Why Vikarna? Who is Vikarna? Vikarna is one of the brothers of Duryodhana, who is by no means comparable to the might of Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Karna. So why is our Duryodhana is mentioning the name of Vikarna? He could have mentioned the name of Dushasan, who still was very powerful. And the reason is, well, anyone knows the reason here? Would like to give a reason? Yes, Mother Kalpana. Unmute yourself. Hare Krishna. Kahan gaye aap, Mother? Not able to unmute yourself. Okay, try again. Yes.
Yes.
Speak up.
Yeah, Vikarna was the only brother who was not very much favorable to Duryodhana and his actions, because he had exhibited that character during Draupadi's Vastraharan also. So he did not like what the Kauravas did, and so he was not exactly favorable to the Pandavas, but he was, you can say that he
Correct.
was
So
rightly-
that's correct, Mother. That's the point. So what will happen during that time when the war will begin? Both the parties will come and make an announcement. Anyone wants to change party? Change. Once the war begin, Hari Bol. We'll see what happens at the end of the war. So Duryodhana was worried because this is setting up of the war. If the war begin and if Yudhishthira makes an announcement, anyone wants to change side, he didn't want to lose Vikarna. And Vikarna was part of all the meetings, all the strategic planning. And losing Vikarna means losing all the secrets. Although he was not qualified or was not as a strong person, but that's the whole point. So this indicates, the great diplomatic move of Duryodhana, like that. Text number 9. Annicha bahava sura madarte tyakta jivitaha nana shastre praharnaha sarva yuddha visaradha. The many other heroes are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. All of them are well equipped with different kinds of weapons, and all are experienced in military science. Prabhupada writes a very beautiful point in the purport. Prabhupada says, if you see, pay attention in the middle of the purport. In other words, it is already concluded that all of them would die in the battlefield of Kurukshetra for joining the party of the sinful Duryodhana. The way Duryodhana said that these all people are willing to die for me, Prabhupada says, so Duryodhana is making a statement that all of you will die because you have taken a side of a sinful man. And then finally, to conclude his motivating speech, Aparyaptam tad asmakam balam bhishma virakshitam paryaptam tudam etesham balam bhima virakshitam. Our strength is immeasurable. We are perfectly protected by grandfather Bhishma, whereas the strength of the Pandavas carefully protected by Bhima is limited. Now, question arises, why Duryodhana got so fearful? I mean, he had 11 Akshahani Sena. Imagine you're playing a cricket match and you know that you're on the bowling side and you know that those who are batting right now they have got some trump card from the umpire. For this whole test match, these two batsmen cannot get out. Can you ever win the test match? How much ever whatever you do. Bhishma Pitama, Ichha Mrityu. Dronacharya cannot be killed. Kripacharya cannot be defeated. Karna, too powerful. Ashwathama, no less. He is one of those rare people who knew the science of Brahmastra. When you have knocked out wickets, how can you defeat somebody? And despite having knocked out wickets, if the captain is fearful, then it really indicates something very, very important. Are you getting the point? Duryodhana had no chance of losing the war, yet he is fearful. Let's take a look at our slide deck. Why Duryodhana was fearful? The lesson that we understand that Duryodhana was fearful was material security and resources does not guarantee success and fearlessness. For example, Pandavas, you will see that they were not fearful at all. And when Arjuna and Duryodhana had gone to Dwarka to sought Krishna's help, and you know this whole story, so not going to details of it. And Duryodhana, Arjuna was standing by the feet, Duryodhana was standing by the head of Lord Shri Krishna, and Lord Shri Krishna was taking rest. And when he woke up, Duryodhana said, well, I came first here. You should listen my request first. Krishna said, well, Arjuna, I saw Arjuna first. And secondly, Arjuna is your younger brother, so I should hear to the appeal of younger brother first. And then understanding why they both have come, Krishna said, well, I have decided not to fight. There are two options. You can either choose me or you can choose my whole Narayani Sena. We're very powerful. And Duryodhana was sweating out. Oh no, my goodness, I lost the whole Narayani Sena. Arjuna would of course take Narayani Sena. What will I do with this Gwala who's not going to fight in the war? He's a useless fellow. He will waste my money on feeding him. And he has a big history of eating too much from his childhood. So Duryodhana was in that tension that, I will get a Gwala and I'll lose the whole army. And Arjuna, without blinking his eyes, says, my dear Lord, I would have you. Krishna, I want you. And you should have taken a look at Duryodhana's face. Internally, he was super joyous, and externally, he was like, what to do, Krishna? That's what my younger brother wants. So I'll settle with your army only. All right, Haribol, mujhe batao who is the general of your army. I'll take the army, I'll go away. He walked away. He walked away. And Arjuna had Krishna by his side. The huge army of Krishna was by the side of Duryodhana. Yet Duryodhana is so fearful. So if you don't have Krishna, Prabhupada used to say, just like our material success is drawing number of zeros on the board. But when you had Krishna, that is like putting 1 before 0. And then those zeros get values. Otherwise, it's all useless. However, Pandavas were fearless. Slide deck, please. The Pandavas were fearless. What does it indicate? Our faith on Krishna determines our degree of fearlessness. Krishna is always present to help the sincere soul, if only we could recognize his presence. Very interesting, you can call it a brief story of, the example of protection, how Krishna always protects his devotees, but we often fail to understand that. This is a conversation. A person says, I and God are walking on the sands of time. And on this sand, I saw 2 sets of footprints, one of mine and the other of God. As I see these 2 footprints, I get immense amount of faith in God being with me. Then suddenly time changed. The ocean goes through high tides and there are massive waves and downpours. The difficult times have now begun. This ocean becomes violent. There are dark, ominous clouds in the sky, thunder, lightning. I then suddenly start seeing only 1 set of footprints. But the life was all good. I could see the footprint of God. But when there were troubles in my life, the second footprint disappeared. I then wondered, how is that in good times, God always walked with me, hand in hand, close to each other. And now the times have changed, things have become difficult. God has left me. Why did you leave me, God? Why? And here the Lord responds. And then suddenly God replied, my dear son, I haven't left you. This 1 set of footprints that you see is mine. I picked you up and carried you through the rough times. I knew you wouldn't be able to walk through these tough times. As I walked with you in my arms, the set of footprints which you see are mine and not yours. I love this. This is so beautiful, and this is what indicates Pandava's life. Next session, I'll speak about some lessons to learn and also why Krishna created so tricky situations in Pandava's life. We'll see that some other aspect next time. But if you would see the life of Pandavas, never ever Pandavas ever blamed Krishna. Any instance? Biggest shock for Arjuna was the loss of Abhimanyu. Even then, Arjuna did not say, Krishna, you are my charioteer. You have already shown me your Virat Roop. Bhagavad-Gita happened before. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma. You are already declared as the Supreme Personality Godhead. Sarvasya Cham Vidhi Sandhi, you reside in the heart of everyone. Were you not aware that today my son will die? You were the charioteer of my chariot. Why did you drive me away from where Abhimanyu was? You took me so far away that I even did not got to know when people were crying on the battlefield at the death of Abhimanyu. Arjuna could have said. Even then, Arjuna did not. And what did he say? Well, those who are responsible for it, tell me who is responsible. And then Yudhishthira said, Jayadratha. And then Arjuna said, I will kill Jayadratha tomorrow. So it's just this is what a subject matter of faith. What a strong faith Pandavas had. And they always had the sense of protection. And like that, we were on which verse? 11th verse, right? So 11th verse, all of you must now give full support to Grandfather Bhishma as you stand at a respective strategic point of entrance into the flanks of the army. And now comes something very interesting. From 12th verse up to the 20th verse is about everyone now blowing their conches. Text number 12. Somebody would like to read the translation of text number 12? Who has the book? Mohan Gopal Prabhu, unmute and go ahead.
11th or 12th, Prabhuji?
12th, Prabhu, 12th.
Tasya sanjanayan harsham kuru braddha pitamihaha simhanadam vinodhyachaihi shankhan dadno pratapavan. Then Bhishma, the great valiant grandseer of the Kuru dynasty, the grandfather of the fighters, blew his conch shell very loudly, making a sound like the roar of a lion, giving Duryodhana joy.
So now, yes, thank you, Prabhu. You can stay online. We can read some more. I'll just tell you a few things. So now things are settled. At this point of time, Sanjay will describe about that he has spoken about Duryodhana's preparation for war, like that, what Duryodhana did. And now Sanjay says that Duryodhana's army blew the conch. So you will see very interesting how Kshatriyas gathered for war. Kshatriyas getting excited for war is just like Sachin Tendulkar becoming excited for another one-day match. Are you getting the point? You know, you tell Sachin Tendulkar, he would leave his lunch and dinner, run to play cricket. I mean, I'm assuming like this. I don't know him personally, but I can say for my own experience when I used to play cricket, you keep everything aside. So Kshatriyas are not one who shy away from fighting. So when these Kshatriyas would assemble for fighting, they were all musical instruments, drums, bugles, all those musical instruments to really, you know, just like a wrestling match. In those days when you have to have big, huge arenas, just like Kamside arranged for Krishna, what a huge arena was built up. And they were all musical instruments, drums were beating, and, you know, to welcome the next warrior, etc., etc. Like that, this was described here. This will be described here now. So here, they blew their conch. So Bhishma, when he heard all this thing from Duryodhana, did not respond in anything. You know, when he said that all of you now support grandfather Bhishma in the 11th verse, Bhishma Pitama, without paying attention to what Duryodhana said, he blew his conch just to tell him that I'm here and I'm going to fight. Don't worry about it. I'm not walking away. And text number 13, now you'll read about how all the different kind of musical instruments begin to play. Please, Prabhu, go ahead. Mohan Gopal Prabhu.
I cannot, sorry. Tatra shankhaścha bhairyascha pranava nakhago mukhaha sahasaivaabhyahanjanta sashabdastu bhavat. After that, the conch shells, drums, bugles, trumpets, and horns were all suddenly sounded, and the combined sound was tumultuous.
So this is what happened at the side of Kauravas. And then at the side of Pandavas, now it is described from text number 14 onwards that how our Krishna and Arjuna blew their conches. So text number 14 just speak about it. There's something very interesting. Now the interesting things about the names will begin. Tatha shveter hayir yukte mahati sayandane stituhu madhava pandavas chaiva divya shankha pradhatmataho. Now why it is mentioned divya? It is mentioned the conchs of Krishna and Arjuna was transcendental. So Prabhupada writes very clearly in the purport, the idea is, that there is, in the third line in the purport says, the sounding of the transcendental consciousness indicated that there was no hope for victory for the other side because Krishna was on the side of Pandava. Second thing, Krishna is addressed as Madhava. Madhava means wherever the Lord is present, the goddess of fortune. Goddess of fortune means all auspiciousness, which means the all victory and fortune was falling Arjuna. In other words, if you see subtly, Sanjaya is declaring what's going to happen. How Pandavas are going to be victorious. And then what were the conches that they played? Text number 15. Panchajanyam Rishikesho Devadattam Dhananjaya Poundaram Dadamau Mahashankam Bhima Karma Vrakodaraha. And Rishikesh, Krishna had his conch by the name of Panchajanyam. Dhananjaya had it conch by the name of Devdattam. Everything has a story how each one of them got the special conches. Poundaram Dadamo Mahashankam, which refers to our Vrakodara Bhima. He had a conch by the name of Poundaram. Why Bhima got a name of Vrakodara? Long story short, Vrakodara means voracious eater. We recently had Pandav Nirjal Ekadashi. The Nirjal Ekadashi was just to support Bhishma Pita or Bhima. Bhima once went to Lord Shri Krishna and said, Prabhu, no fasting for me. Your disciples really trouble me a lot. There's a lot of peer pressure in my family. Yudhishthira does Nirjal, Arjuna does Nirjal, everyone does Nirjal. And they are having undue expectation from me. I should also do Nirjal. Forget about Nirjal. I cannot live without eating. So you find out some easy means for me. And you know that famous pastime when Bakasur, right? The demon. So when Kunti said to that Brahman family, no, why are you sending your husband? I have 5 sons. I can sacrifice one. So the family said, no, how can you do that? And Kunti with a smile on her face said, oh, don't worry. I'm not sending anyone like that. I'm sending my second son, Bhimsen. He will sort out the matter once for all. So when Bhimsen got to know that today he's going to carry a truckload of food for Bakasur, right? Not Banasur, Bakasur. You don't know how joyful Bhima was. For so many days they were wandering in the forest and Bhima was not getting sufficient food. So Bhima had a most joyful ride when he was carrying the truckload of fruit. And by the time he reached to the cave where Bakasur was there, he had already eaten everything. He was just finishing the last morsel and Bakasur came out. He saw the whole truckload food is empty. And there's this young grown-up man, he's finishing up his food. He came and attacked Bhima. And Bhima said, hey, you rascal, wait. Let me finish my banana. With the left hand, he got hold of the collar of Bakasur and held him there. Finished his banana, mango, whatever he had to eat. And without washing his hands, with that nice Mahaprasadam hand, he gave a tight slap to Bakasur. That was the end of his life. So for this incident, for this valor of Bhima, he is known as Vrakodara. So Prabhupada in his class while speaking on this verse, I remember categorically made a point that while you are honoring Prasadam, our inherent nature is while we are sitting and honoring Prasadam, our eyes are often distracted to the plates of other devotees. Usko kitna gulab jamun mila? Mujhe do, usko 4. So Srila Prabhupada is making a point that never ever look into the plate of other who is eating how much. So somebody maybe have a capacity like Bhimsen, fine, but he should also have a capacity to do that much seva. So if your capacity is this much to do seva, so be happy with whatever diet you have. So never Arjuna complained or Yudhishthira complained. Why Bhimsen? So whenever they would do Madhukari, 50% of food by default initially will get separated for Bhimsen. The remaining 5 members, Kunti and the 4 sons, would manage 10% only. That was the whole system with that. Text number 16 to 18, there is a discussion on how all of them in the Pandava side blew their conches. Text number 16 to 18, reading the translation. King Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, blew his conch, Anant Vijay. Nakul Sahdev blew their conch. Like that, many other blew their conch. And text number 19 is something very interesting. Saghosha Dhritarashranam Hridayani Vayadaryat Nabhascha Prithvim Chayema Tumulo Abhaya Nunadyan. So now this text number 19, Sanjay says, what happened when Pandavas blew their conch? So when Sanjay described that Kauravas blew their conches, nothing happened at the side of Pandavas. But when Pandavas blew their conches, it is described in Mahabharata, those who were sitting on top of elephant or horses and those who were standing on the chariot, everyone fainted. You know, on Arjuna's Rath, there was, our कहते हैं भगवान श्री कृष्ण, along with Lord Shri Krishna, there was somebody else also sitting on the chariot of Arjuna. Who knows who was there on the chariot of Arjuna?
Hanumanji.
Hanumanji, yes. And what was Hanumanji doing? Hanumanji did not kill any demon, right? He did not slap anyone, nothing he did. So what Hanumanji was doing sitting on the chariot of Arjuna? Who knows?
Roaring.
Roaring. Why Hanumanji was roaring? What was the utility of roaring in the war? So when Bhim and Hanumanji had met, and that time Bhimsen had asked for the help of Hanumanji, not asked, Hanumanji said, Bhim, if you want, I can settle your case. So Bhim said, no, how can it happen? Now let me speak something, little 1 or 2 points about the glories of Bhimsen also. We just spoke very briefly. Now Bhimsen was such a Kshatriya, if he does not get to flex his muscles even a single day, he will go crazy. He has to beat somebody. So when they were in forest, when they were given vanvas, when you read Mahabharata, you see, the one person during the whole 12 years of exile who got the most chastisement among all the Pandavas were Bhimsen. Yudhishthira was chastised. Dhaumya Rishi would chastise. The local sadhus would chastise. And everyone would say, Yudhishthira, you should keep this fellow under control. He's very proud, he's very arrogant. What will happen with Bhimsen? He had such a Kshatriya spirit. And if there is 2-3 days have passed and he has not beaten up anyone, he will run out in the forest. Ha! He'll scream at the top of his voice. And he'll uproot the huge trees, throw them. And if any tiger and lion would come in front of him, he would slap them. So after a few days, there was such a terror of Bhimsen. If any animal as huge as elephant, if they heard sound, they understood Bhim is coming and they'll run away. They used to run away from Bhimsen. So Bhimsen and Hanumanji met, as you know of the story, hopefully. And Hanumanji said, I can settle it. I did settle Ravan. This is Kaurava, nothing. Bhim said, no. What will I do? I have taken a vow to kill 100. I have to do. Therefore, Bhimsen said, well, Hanumanji, my dear elder brother, you can be present with Arjuna. It was too much for Bhimsen to take anyone's help. So he said, my dear Hanumanji, you be please present. So Hanumanji said, well, I'll be there on the flag of Arjuna's chariot. And during the war, I will roar. So when the war is going on, so before they will shoot arrows, they will shout at each other. You understand? Shouting, na? Prem bhare shabd bolna. Hindi mein gaaliyan dete na, kutte billi ityadi. So they will scream at each other. So whoever could scream the louder, could create the more ferocious vibration, it will demoralize other warrior. So whenever Bhimsen would enter the war scene, and whenever he would roar, half of the warrior will throw their weapon and run away just by roaring only. He didn't have to kill many because nobody had the courage to come in front of him. So Hanumanji was sitting on the chariot of Arjuna and he was roaring. And that roaring of Hanumanji would shatter the heart of the enemies. And these were some of the tricks of the Kshatriya war code that point of time. And this is what is mentioned in text number 20. At that time, Arjuna, the son of Pandu, seated in the chariot bearing the flag marked with Hanuman, took up his bow, prepared to shoot his arrows. Going after looking at the sons of Dhritarashtra drawn in military array, Arjuna then spoke to Lord Shri Krishna these words. So here 13 to 20, which was the second section of this chapter, where the signs of victory, different signs of victory are being described. Hanumanji is also present, etc. has been described now. Let's take a quick look to the slide. So this was the second part, Lord protection to his surrendered devotees. And these are some of the factors which are shown about how Pandavas will definitely be victorious, as spoken by Sanjay so far. And now comes the third theme, which will continue next time, uncertainty. Let me just make a one point here and we'll close on that. So at this point of time, the war is ready to start. If the warriors have blown their conch, it means now you can fight, you can engage in the war. However, something very interesting happened. Arjuna, this is the next discussion, which we'll do next time, but just to give you a little bit picture here. Then Arjuna told Krishna, my dear Lord. Of course, he doesn't say Lord, he says Krishna. Senayor madhye ratam sthapya me achyutah yavadetan irksheham yodho kaman avasthitan. Jo yudh ladne ki kamna se, those who have come with the desire to fight, I would like to see them. Krishna, drive my chariot in the middle of both the armies. So this has its own very important meanings. We'll discuss next time. But I'm just giving a picture that Arjuna asked Krishna to drive his chariot. Krishna brought his chariot. And then Arjuna got bewildered because Krishna brought Arjuna's chariot right in front of Bhishma Pitama Dronacharya. Interesting. Both the armies was facing each other for miles together. Imagine Krishna would have brought Arjuna's chariot in front of Duryodhan. Bhagavad-Gita would have never happened. But because Krishna brought Arjuna's chariot in front of Dronacharya and Bhishma Pitama, Arjuna becomes overwhelmed by emotions. And then he said, my dear Lord, I will not fight. So to make a point, I'll conclude with this saying. Arjuna, who had prepared for so long to fight, after seeing his relatives and friends, his teachers standing on the other side, suddenly became so weak-hearted. I mean, it does not make sense, because Arjuna had prepared, and it's not that Arjuna was not aware of what's about to happen. Arjuna's weakness here is presented in two ways. Again, it's a discussion for next week. Just to conclude, I'm making one point. One is his compassion as a pure devotee, and his decision of giving up his duty is his material weakness. His emotions of affection for Kauravas is a symptom of his being a pure devotee. But not performing his duty is what is being criticized. That is because of material weakness or weakness of the heart, like that. And here's something that I want to make a point and pause here. We'll elaborate next time. How many of you have experienced, let's say you have gone to Mayapur and you go for take Mangalarti Darshan and your heart is fully ecstatic. You're experiencing the highest bliss in Krishna consciousness. Look at the beautiful Darshan Shri Radha Madhav Panchatattva Narasimhadev Srila Prabhupada. Fantastic moving program. And you're really, really high on your spiritual consciousness. Right after morning program, you come out and then you say, where is Prasadam? Why Prasadam is so late? Why these people are serving Prasadam so far away? And suddenly you get into a material consciousness. We begin to complain. How many have this whole swing of our consciousness from a nice spiritual platform back to a material platform? Please raise your hand. How many have experienced this thing? This is something what Arjuna is going through here right now. As I said, we're gonna make it relatable in the sense where you find yourself in the shoes of Arjuna. Arjuna is also going through the swings here. And similarly, we also go through. How to overcome it, how to deal with it, we'll discuss that next time. But I just wanted to end on a note that what Arjuna experiences, despite being such a close companion of Krishna, that suddenly he becomes affected by material consciousness, is also an ongoing affair for us. When we are in association of sadhus and holy dham, we are also in high spirits of our detachment and attachment to Guru and Krishna. But when we are away from that association, similarly, immediately material consciousness takes prevalence. So how do we balance out? That's where the message of Bhagavad-Gita plays a very vital role. Some of you, most of you may say, Prabhu, Arjuna was faced with a very life-threatening crisis. I don't have it. So looks like message of Bhagavad Gita may not be relevant at this point of time because I don't have that crisis. I do agree. Okay, all right. But matter of fact is any and every crisis is still inevitable because life is always about ups and downs. Okay, you may not have crisis, but at least you still experience your mood swings between the spiritual realm and the material realm. And that is what Arjuna is going through right now. And Arjuna gets stuck in a material consciousness where he says, I will not perform my duty, etc., etc. So what Krishna does through Bhagavad Gita, he stabilizes and establishes Arjuna back into spiritual consciousness. So the very opening line of Prabhupada's purport, Krishna's protection is guaranteed when you surrender to Krishna, the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, which Prabhupada makes in the purport, the first purport. And there we saw that how, who studies Bhagavad Gita regularly, it what means surrender. So when we study Bhagavad Gita regularly and follow it nicely, we stay tuned to spiritual consciousness. And that's how the life's balance can happen. The moment we get disconnected from the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita, we very soon fall back into material consciousness. With that, we'll pause here for today's discussion, wherein in the second half, we saw about a little bit of cultural nuances. We discussed the reason of Duryodhana's fear, how diplomatic he was. We also talked about who was a greater Danveer, Karna the Danveer or Duryodhana Danveer. We spoke about that also. We spoke about how when Pandavas blew their conches, it shattered the hearts of Kauravas like that. And then we concluded with that how Arjuna, the next section which is about to begin, how Arjuna asked Krishna to drive his chariot in the middle. And to conclude with the last point, sometimes people ask, when the conches were blown, why nobody shot an arrow at Arjuna? There is no speculation here and there. A lot of people give a lot of different answers. Mahabharata makes it very clear. It was Bhishma Pitama who was the commander-in-chief for the Kauravas army. He did not give the direction to shoot an arrow. Therefore, nobody from the Kauravas side shot an arrow. And of course, nobody from the Yudhishthira side going to shoot an arrow when they saw Arjuna was in the middle of the war, battlefield like that. So that's it for today. We'll continue this discussion. Krishna's protection is guaranteed. We also saw that lesson, whoever takes shelter of Krishna. But how Krishna's protection comes is very inconceivable. It's not that easy. And I just gave you that example of men walking on a sand. It's not that easy to understand, comprehend. This will be a theme which will continue as we continue the discussion. So with that, I'll pause here. Of course, my scheduled time is up. In case anyone has any comment or any question, we can see that. Any clarification or any comments or any questions on the discussion? All right, so thank you all for joining in for today. We'll continue our discussion next week. And we'll also have some quizzes prepared on our discussions. I would message one or two devotees who I know from here. So what we're gonna do it, previously I would prepare a quiz and then have it up on the portal on our discussion. If any 2-3 devotees who are interested from the previous batch of Bhakti Shastri, not from the new batch, they would like to take up the service of preparing some 10-12 questions from the session, like a multiple choice question like that, you can ping me and I'll guide you with how to do it. And then with those MCQs will go on our website just to see how much we have, remain attentive through the session like that. All right. So with that, we pause here for today. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavad-Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, you would like to remind about Prabhupada's Smaranotsav, the evening program?
Okay, so there is this evening program today at 6 o'clock. We are kind of hosting a Srila Prabhupada's Smaranotsav, where every weekend we have Srila Prabhupada disciple speaking about Srila Prabhupada. Last week we had His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, and today evening we'll have His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj. It's 6 p.m. IST. In case if your schedule works, do join in. And that's it for today program. All right. It will be live on YouTube also. Those who want to join in Zoom, they can join in Zoom. I guess Madan would have shared she has shared some WhatsApp link where you will get announcement updates for that program. Hare Krishna. All right.